Hello, my name's Tania Marshall, all the way from Australia. It's lovely to be invited by Asperger Sevilla. I hope I pronounce this right. Please forgive me if I don't. The president of Asperger Sevilla, Rafael Jato, Asperger Sevilla, Lucia, thank you. And congratulations on your first Women on the Spectrum conference. I think it's fantastic. I am very encouraged to see these conferences taking place and discussions that take place before and after the conference, and the networking that can take place as a result of this kind of thing. And if it can be done on a regular basis, that's just fantastic. So I think these conferences are inherently important, and it's because we need to let people know that females do and can have autism or Asperger syndrome. We need to let them also know that about the ratio and what the ratio. People are thinking that the ratio is 4:1 when actually a brand new meta-analysis has found that it's 3:1. So for every 3 males, 1 female. In my clinical practice, anecdotally speaking here, what I'm seeing is a ratio of 2:1. And in the future, professionals like me that work in this field full time, we are seeing, we are probably going to be seeing 1:1 ratio. So that's in itself is a wonderful reason to have these kinds of conferences. We need to have these kinds of conferences to share facts, to have a head start over males. And when all the information came out years ago on males, and then you had the stereotypes that you have to battle and the stigma. So having these conferences now, I hope, will prevent stereotyping, that a woman with Asperger's, would look like this or not look like this, or would behave this way or not behave this way. I cannot underestimate the inherent dangers of going undiagnosed. So I have assessed and diagnosed thousands of females and males as well, and in their autobiographies and in their stories and in their interviews, they have told me some of the most painful things that they've gone through, which I'll talk about a little bit later. The importance of the diagnosis is that, and I believe that the diagnosis should be done as early as possible, and that would be before grade 1. So anything after grade 1 is a late diagnosis. And the older a person is, they then become a part of what is known as the lost generations. Those people that went undiagnosed because we didn't know yet enough about the female profile. So now that we're starting to know about the female profile, we're starting to know that there are significant differences between males and females. And we know the suicide rates are 27 times higher in the autistic population than in the general population. So that's something that's very scary. A new study came out that spoke about broader autism phenotype, and this is where you have family members who have maybe 60 pieces of a 100-piece puzzle, but they don't have enough that it's interfering their ability to work or communicate or have a family and go about their day-to-day life and functioning. But the results of that study found that those people that have those 60 pieces, that their suicide rates are higher. And so that was a new study, and that was very interesting. So that leads me to question and think, well, we need to do also things for those that don't meet the criteria but have 60 pieces, because they're struggling as well. The biggest reason to have a diagnosis is self-awareness and understanding, so that the little person does not grow up thinking that they are an alien, this is their words, or they're weird, or they're from another planet, or sometimes they think that they should be born in the opposite gender, or the opposite sex. So they feel that maybe it was a mistake, I should have been a boy or I should have been a girl. They know from before grade 1 or at grade 1 that they are different than their peers, but they don't know why, and they're often wanting to know why, especially the more intelligent ones. And that thought in their head will go around and around and around in their head. Why am I different? Why am I different? What is wrong with me? Why am I so weird, etc.? And that's why this is so important to talk about. So many people on the spectrum see the person first, not the age, not the gender of the person, not the sexuality of the person. So often I've seen people on the spectrum be with people that are much older than them or much younger than them, or none of that matters. It's the actual person that matters to them, who that person is. The painful themes, the themes that come from the interviews that I've done with females, probably the most painful things for them, they would say, would be not being believed. So not being believed by family members, not having their support in terms of going even to get a diagnosis, or the painfulness of not even being able to find anybody that could diagnose them or assess them. They also talk to me about their prior experiences with professionals, where they might have been given they've said childish tests, which sort of makes me think they were given the wrong kinds of tests. Where they were treated as more cognitively impaired than they really are, and treated differently at work as well, so discriminated at work. Those are very painful things. The other painful theme is the social naivety and being taken advantage of. So many women have talked to me about their naivety in believing literally what the person has said to them, and either had things stolen from them, or people moving into their house, or they've been raped, they've been molested, all kinds of horrible stories I've heard. And so there's a theme around safety that we need to address for these girls and women. Misdiagnosed and mistreated is also another painful theme that these women have spoken about. So a lot of women have been misdiagnosed with borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Those are the typical ones. And then from that diagnosis, being put on antipsychotic medication, or the wrong kind of medication, or given the wrong kind of behavioral treatments. Another theme is the compensatory mechanisms and the mask and the coping strategies that the person that has more IQ is able to employ. So for example, I had a female tell me that she has a very vivid memory when she was 6 years old of running, and it took one comment, she said, from someone else who said, "You have a funny run." And she made it her mission to practice her run, and completely changed her run and her gait so that she looked normal and didn't have a funny run anymore. That's just one example. So when you've got a female who's doing that their whole life, and they still feel different, and they come in to see a professional, and professionals don't know what to ask, the right questions to ask, the right way to assess a female, they will not be able to unpack that. And so then the female will not receive her diagnosis when she really is actually on the spectrum. The traits in women are quite different to men. Their social communication is different, so they can look at you in the eye, they can make superficial conversation, they much prefer one-on-one conversations, they don't really like group conversations. So they'll come in to see a professional, and they can sit there and talk, and the professional would just say, and has said, I've been told by these women, "You're looking at me in the eye, you're having a conversation with me, you can't have Asperger's, or you can't have autism." That's something that's a theme that I hear a lot about. From very early on, prior grade 1, the masking and compensatory strategies begin. So they are consummate actresses, and they should all win Oscar awards for their actress abilities to be able to get through life pretending to be a neurotypical person. While those compensatory mechanisms have some benefits, they have some negativities as well. So some negative things where that causes complete exhaustion for the person. And by the time they're about 40, often I'm seeing them with chronic fatigue syndrome, complete social exhaustion, burnout, depression, having to go into mental health wards, developing mental illnesses as a function of having to cope as a neurotypical, or trying to cope and be a neurotypical, and not understanding why they can't keep up with the conversation with females, why they can't, they say, stand the conversations at school with the moms. That's very hard for them. The diversity on the spectrum is something that I really like talking about, because I want to break that stereotype. I don't even want that stereotype to occur. So with the males, we have the typical stereotypes of the Sheldon Coopers or the Rain Mans, etc. There is no stereotypical female on the spectrum. So there will be, I will see the tomboy type, I will see the princess type, I will see the sciencey kind of geeky type. The diversity is just like the diversity that you see when you look outside your window and you look at nature. So on the topic of the diversity within the entire, what I call collective, you will have some, I guess, subgroups within the entire group. So you'll have some women who are systemizers, high systemizers. You'll have some women who are high empathizers. You'll also have women who have a different type of thinking. So they may think in patterns. They may be a pattern thinker, or a word fact thinker, or a visual spatial thinker. So, and that work comes from Temple Grandin in her book, The Autistic Brain. That's a really good book. So there are different kinds of thinkers. You've got your systemizers, your empathizers, and you've got those that are naturally driven to the sciences, or those that are driven to the creative side. So where people often ask me, where will you find an Aspie? That's an affectionate term for a person with Asperger syndrome, or someone with autism. You'll find them in Hollywood. Hollywood is full of people on the spectrum. There is more perfect pitch in the autistic population than there is in the general population. You'll find them at NASA, Microsoft, Apple, at the particle collider, CERN particle colliders, or any particle colliders, the physicists, the engineers. And it's really great and positive to see that some companies are starting to now hire people with Asperger's for their specific traits. It's a wonderful thing. So I'm seeing this with Microsoft, who have started a project where they want to hire people with autism, and that's a wonderful thing. I'm seeing this with the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, where they have a special ops force that are made up of solely men with Asperger's for their unique and specialized traits, which is a wonderful thing. We're using their strengths and their talents. And what I want to see is companies or organizations start to use the females' unique traits. And so that is the topic of my third book, is their unique traits and strengths. And hopefully that will spread, and we can then start hiring women on the spectrum for their specialized skills. So they're also very, very good with animals. So I have diagnosed zoologists and an animal carer in a variety of ways that they work with animals. One thing I wanted to talk about, the very last thing here is, or one of the last things, is the myths. I think that it's really important to just start dispelling myths right now. This is one of the most painful things for women as well, as I was speaking about. And it's the you cannot have autism because you ... And some of them, I mean, there's so many, I can't list them all, but some of them are because you can look at me in the eye, because you are having a conversation with me, because you are too intelligent, because you are too pretty. So that was said to a supermodel who I diagnosed, who has Asperger syndrome, who actually spends her time teaching deportment skills and social skills and etiquette to businesses. And she actually learned all this because her parents put her in a modeling and deportment school, and that's where she learned all of that. And they loved the way she looked on the camera so much that at 15, or might have been a little bit younger, she was off to Milan and Europe, and she was doing the runways for years as a professional model. And nobody would have guessed that she was on the spectrum. Nobody would have guessed at all. But she, when you unpack it, she tells you about her difficulties even to this day. Just wanted to add that part in too as well, because that's really important to dispel those kinds of myths. Because women, they can look at you in the eye, they can have conversations with you, they can and are often very intelligent. And yes, some of them are pretty, and yes, some of them are supermodels, actors, actresses, dancers, and so on. And that doesn't mean that you can't have Asperger's or autism. So that's something that I think is really important to spread around. So I have diagnosed zoologists, professional dancers, professional musicians, professional artists and professional singers, celebrities, supermodels, engineers, vets, recently an ER doctor. You want an ER doctor who's on the spectrum if you end up in the ER. Teachers, nurses, psychologists, pediatricians, special ed teachers, and that's just some of the careers that these women are participating in. Now, that's not to say that they're not having some difficulties in their careers, and when they do, I help them with their social communication skills with their co-workers in terms of improving their social skills, or maybe talking to their employer, and we're trying to get to a stage where disability is not seen as in a negative light, that it's actually seen as an ability. So I'm a very strength-based psychologist, and whenever a female comes to see me or wants an assessment or diagnosis, the first thing I ask is, what are you good at? What are your strengths? What are your abilities? What are your talents? And what are your gifts? And then we go to, well, what are the challenges? And why do you think that you might be on the spectrum? And then we start to unpack that. So, in closing, thank you so much for asking me to be a part of your conference. I'm very grateful. I am happy to share my knowledge. I'm happy that you are having this conference, and I hope it turns into an annual conference. And I hope that we can spread as much of this information around the internet, because this is the quickest way we can do it. And we need to do it now, and we need to do it fast, because the consequences of females going undiagnosed is severe. But there is light ahead in the tunnel. There's a lot of research coming out. We're starting to look at interventions for girls and females. So we're making more headway, I would say, at a faster rate than researchers did with the males, researchers and professionals with males. So that's also a good thing as well. So again, thank you. I hope you had a wonderful day. I hope you are able to network and share information and spread this around wherever you can. I want it all around the world so that no more females get left behind. Thank you. Bye.